who's on our panel today? We're fortunate again, like I said yesterday, to have Dean with us. He's going to be moderating our panel. I don't think I need to introduce him again. He's been introduced quite a few times yesterday. But on our panel, we have 4 people from across Ontario and across different roles in terms of their jobs. So we have Brenda on my far left, your right. Brenda Sherry is currently an itinerant technology coach at Upper Grand District School Board in Guelph, Ontario, and after 20 years as a regular classroom and special education teacher. Brenda has co-founded Minds on Media, works on the Educational Computing Organization Annual Conference. I think that's ECHO, right? Yes. Yeah, people will know it as ECHO. That's ECHO, if you're not sure what that big long was. Develops and facilitates professional learning for Ontario Teachers Federation and Wilfrid Laurier's University Additional Qualification courses, and has been a connected coach and a community leader with the PLP Network. If you haven't checked out the PLP Network, I strongly recommend you go and have a look there. Next to Brenda is Chris Prefontaine. Chris is a coordinator, or just moving into this role as coordinator instructor of a Midtown Technology option at OISE U of T. As a long-time advocate of technology and 21st century learning, she has the task of influencing groups of new teacher candidates as they examine pedagogy and consider the ways that they will level up, good putting that in your bio, thank you, to benefit their future students. Over her 24-year career in York Region District School Board, Chris has taught several different grades and held a variety of leadership roles at her schools. She has been a computer resource teacher, regional curriculum consultant, and an education officer, and has shared her expertise and love of technology at a variety of conferences. Next to Chris, we have Brian Harrison. Brian Harrison is a principal at Park Avenue Public School in York Region District School Board, a bustling and busy K-8 school in Holland Landing, Ontario. Over his 22-year career in education, he's taught in all 3 elementary divisions, worked as a school librarian and instructional coach, and served as district curriculum consultant in York Region District School Board. He tweets at bharrisonp and blogs at brian-harrison.net. You can find all these bios online, so the link to his blog would be there. I highly recommend checking it out. Finally, last but not least, on my far right, your left. I should be able to do that. I always had to do that in classes, do the opposite of the left and right. We have Rudy Candela. Rudy is currently teaching grade 7 class at Calvin Park Public School in Kingston. That's Limestone District School Board, right? I always get those mixed up, you know that. He is an elementary school teacher with 15 years teaching experience. He's taught in Vancouver, Toronto, and Kingston. He is the lead teacher for the primary junior math AQ at Queen's University and has taught parts 1, 2, 3 of the mathematics primary and junior online AQ courses offered at Queen's, as well as the junior ABQ course. Rudy is proud of being a long-standing champion for the Learning Connections program. And what was really fun is when I read Rudy's extended bio, we realized that we actually almost went to school together, both for our pre-education in engineering at U of T and also in our B.Ed at York University for MST. I think we were off by 1 year on both or something like that. So we almost crossed paths 20 years ago when we started our, not 25, too many years ago. But we didn't. We crossed just in the last few years. So we have a very expert panel for you today, facilitated by Dean. I will not hold them up anymore. The floor is yours, Dean.
Well, welcome our panelists this morning. So I've moderated a few of these. I've sat on a few of them, and what I've told, I'll give the inside scoop as to what I've told our panelists to do, kind of the way we like things to flow with that. I'm not a particular fan of panels where each person gives sort of their own little story, and then it becomes 4 separate little diatribes as opposed to a dialogue. And so I'm really wanting to encourage our panelists to be relaxed, be in conversation, sort of gathering together to listen, but at the same time wanting to encourage all of you to engage as well. And I will definitely make time. And in fact, I don't know that we need to wait to the end to have you ask questions. If you feel like there's just the appropriate time ask a question, step up to the mic, raise your hand, shout, whatever. We'd love you to do that. As well, if you want to follow along on Twitter and use the hashtag, and if you're a little less brave, but just want to throw a comment, that's a great way to do some back channeling. So I would encourage folks actually to pull up that. Even if you don't use Twitter, you can go to twitter.com/ and do a search for ASI 2013, and you can see what other folks are saying. Because perhaps you don't feel like it maybe warrants a full-blown question, or you want to direct it, but you do have a perspective that you share on this topic. So this isn't something that is obviously completely foreign to anybody. We're all just sort of trying to figure it out. We just have some folks here who have maybe taken a little more time of late, anyways, to think about these questions and maybe just lead us into deeper conversation. So that's your charge, and so I want to start with a couple of things, a couple of questions. I think that's really important to me. I know that whenever we use, education is really good at buzzwords, and so now we got I want to throw the word innovation, and then also the theme of this conference, leveling up. So maybe just a few thoughts from you, and I won't. I'll put Brian on the spot just because I think I can get away with this with Brian a little easier. But anybody really, to define what it is that you mean when you hear the words innovation or even leveling up, and I'll let you sort of decide if you want to tackle both of those or just one of those. What does that actually mean? What are we talking about? Help us understand your perspective on this.
Sure. First of all, it's really nice to be here. It's the first time I think I've worn long pants since graduation, grade 8 graduation, back in the last week of June. But it's really nice to be here. I'm principally here really because it's not often you get to hear the word moderate and Dean Shareski in the same sentence. So that alone was intriguing. So, and those of you who know Dean might appreciate that humor. And if it's not lost on me, certainly. For me, innovation is not about technology. It's about a way of thinking. And that's why I hesitate, and Dean mentioned the word, the buzzwords, and innovation is something that is thrown around a lot in the education sector now. And it's usually associated with technology. And, if you use an iPad in a classroom, then all of a sudden you're an innovator. For me, thinking about innovation is more thinking about, as a teacher, creating an environment where my students are able to put out ideas and act upon them. And it's, as a principal, it's about including the ideas and the hopes and the dreams of the staff that I'm working with to think about doing things a little differently, think about doing things from more of a curiosity stance than less of an expert stance. So I think there's lots of different ways that we can put a spin on what it means to be an innovative educator. But I think if we look back over the history of adults hanging around with young people to help them learn stuff, that it's always been adults who are prepared to challenge, as Seth Godin says, the sort of that status quo. Always those adults who've been prepared to push a little against the conventions that are viewed as innovators. And I think now more than ever, it's important that we not only validate that, but also do what we can to enrich it and accelerate it. Anyone want to pick a fight? Yeah.
I would support that. In my thinking, I guess that question immediately change came to mind. So I think innovation is about a change in thinking, which doesn't always happen instantly. So I like the three words you used: innovate, collaborate, and then transform. And I think in schools, that's what I see. I see that there might be a new practice or a new tool that we have, but it's when people come together and really want to look deeply at that things can transform. And I think in my own example, in my work as a coach, 5 years ago we started a digital storytelling festival. And now this year, it's the 5th year, I've had a chance to look back on what that's meant. It's been innovative for our board, but more because of the student voice that's come out of it, with teachers really going deeply into what does thoughtful creation of media mean, and authentic audience, and all those other things. So it can be instant in some ways when we get new tools, but I think there's this deeper piece that comes with it in order for transformation to happen.
So is that where the notion, again, maybe I'm putting words in folks' mouth, but thinking about the connection of leveling up, like that's, I don't know if that's kind
Very
of your
much so.
perspective. I don't know if Rudy or Chris has any thoughts on just taking Brenda's idea about sort of, innovative is can be done quickly, but then there's also this other more deeper, thoughtful.
Well, I think that the innovation goes hand in hand with leveling up, because everything we should be doing in education should be purposeful. It should have a goal. And usually we look at student achievement. And if we're looking to increase student achievement, that in itself is leveling up, bringing students to the next level so that they can be the best that they can be. And the innovative technologies seem to engage students more. They use a lot of the innovation themselves at home in their day-to-day practice that we might not be doing in schools for whatever reason. So by using these innovative technologies, we engage them better, and through their engagement and use of their existing expertise, we can bring them to that next level, which is our leveling up, taking it to being the best students, best people that they can be, and achieve their potential.
So from a classroom perspective, Rudy, is there a thought on that?
I think like the engagement is something that I would definitely make a reference to, but the other thing for me in innovation is the process of learning is, I think, affected by all this technology, and innovation is about finding a place for the technology. Like, I'm just thinking, how many web-based tools have I seen in the last 5 years? And now the tablets are in and they're more accessible. What does that bring into the mix? And innovation is about finding a place for them, because they do make a difference in engagement and achievement, I believe. And that's part of the innovation, to allow those things to be in there and to know how to collaborate, I think, is as well part.
So I'm going to pull right off the bat from Twitter, and I think this is Andrew Campbell who asks a great question. He says, if innovation is so important, why are schools so resistant to new ideas? I mean, if we were just listening to the way you guys spoke, we just think, well, this is awesome.
Right.
So this is all the stuff that's happening, and we don't have any problems to deal with. This is just all unicorns and rainbows.
I'll tell you, sorry,
Go ahead, right, Rudy.
one thing, just because it's, I was in the afternoon, sorry I forget the lady down there, I was at her presentation. In the afternoon, you had a presentation. Heather, thank you. And one of the things right away I noticed was some of the things that we had to do with embedding. And I hadn't embedded in a long time, so I was trying to remember how to do that. You're asking lots of questions, I remember. And then I'm thinking, that's one of the obstacles still. Even though it's become a lot easier, there's still some of that. I think the obstacle of the perceived or real, like, just, it's not as easy as we think it is sometimes. And there are teachers and administrators at our levels that there is a learning curve, I think. And we have to acknowledge that.
I think there are two levels to the hesitation that we receive from some teachers. First of all, it's the lack of working technology. So in some classrooms, they may not have access to some of the tools, or there's some obstacle that they encounter. And rather than look for ways to overcome the obstacle, they say, you know what, I've been doing this a certain way for a very long time. I know it works, and I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing. Whereas they need to step back, look at their practice and say, okay, you have been doing this for a long time and you think it's working. Is it really working? Is it working well? And maybe adopt look for support. When I work with people, I model and then I support them. And look for others who can show you an idea, show you a practice, challenge your thinking a little bit so you can re-examine your practice, and then give you support so that you can perhaps those challenges, those hesitancies, that you can examine them.
Well, I think part of it, and it gets to the core of the question Andrew asked, is about how we've designed our schools and the culture of instruction, and also the culture of collaboration that exists within our schools. And so if we have schools that are designed and have been designed for a long time, where one adult is responsible for the learning of 25 to 30 children, and there's very little collaboration at the practice level between the adults working in the building, then you're going to get what you get. And I think what we have noticed through the explosion of teachers participating in social networking through Twitter and blogging is that our teachers are actually not the barrier to this, because there's a huge appetite amongst teachers to connect, to share, and to collaborate. Not all teachers, because I'm mindful of the fact that for the many teachers that are involved in sharing their practice through social networks, there's a ton of teachers that are not. But we know there's an appetite there. And once there's an appetite, there needs to be some coordination and some leadership and some structure to allow for that collaboration to occur. And in my mind, in the school that I work in and the teachers and the kids that I work with, everybody wants to work together. I think that's a given. It's how to learn how to do that. And that's a skill that, frankly, in our professional training, we weren't really given a great deal of experience in. And in our current model of professional learning, we're not always given the opportunity to play nicely, and not so nicely, frankly, around the use of ideas in our workplaces. For many teachers, professional learning is still something you go out to engage in, instead of being seen as something that you engage in every day within your own school.
See, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with that perspective, Brian, only from the sense that, you say there's an appetite, and while I agree with that, I always struggle between how much of what we need to do needs to be centered around, as you say, providing that support, providing that structure for those teachers to do these kinds of things, and how much of the conversation still needs to be around helping people to see that change and that shift is necessary. And so again, if this is again not a great audience to have that conversation with, in that you're here in August, learning about all this new stuff, excited to implement this in your classroom. If I just took a random sampling of the same number of teachers and plopped them in this room, how would they perceive this conversation? Would they be saying, yes, I'd love to do this, show me more? Or would the conversation be more around, why are we doing this stuff in the first place? I guess I'm struggling trying to figure out. I know it's both. I know that there's, as you said, there's both. I'm just trying to figure out where should the emphasis of this broader conversation be on? Just let's just move forward. Let's accept that it is and go ahead. Or is it still more about helping people understand why we should even be having these conversations?
Well, I was going to echo what Brian was saying, that I think a lot of the problem is that we expect people to be learning about things rather than learning through things. So we want to be learning about technology or learning about inquiry or about collaboration without actually living it ourselves. So an example is the AQ that I teach, which is a part 1. Everybody in the class was really gung-ho about technology and about inquiry. But they really didn't know how to go about it. So we decided that we would create a class that was really a project-based learning project. And they chose a culminating event, that they would share their learning with their peers. And very, very much a newbie to technology group. And it wasn't until, I was there zooming out as teacher and participant, that co-learning piece, sometimes for them, to say, okay, this is the messy stuff. this is where you guys you want me to tell you what to do, and I'm not going to do it because inquiry is about you making your way. And they really had to experience that and construct their own knowledge. And then it was a real aha moment for me this year because they had a spectacular event, and they realized that we might not have covered everything that we were supposed to do in our curriculum, but the ongoing learning that they experienced and becoming a collaborative community, the connection, learning what social media could do for them as a learner when they were creating something. This is the kind of thing that I think the ministry is getting at when we focus on collaborative inquiry in schools. So it's got to be pressure and support, but I think people have to stop talking about it and take action and do something in order for innovation to really happen.
So let me just
We
continue
do a lot
on
of
with
talking about.
what Brenda's talking about here, and ask the other three folks thinking about what are, she shared an example of sort of an innovative breakthrough, I guess, and so just thinking about that either in your classroom or your school, or in your, give me an example of that sort of piggybacks on Brenda's idea of this was a breakthrough kind of moment.
I think Brenda mentioning that the teachers are reflecting on the course and saying, well, we didn't cover all of the curriculum. That's one of the things that holds people back, that they say, oh, if I engage in this project or I try this, it's going to take too much time and I'm not going to be able to cover all of my curriculum. And I think that the teachers need to see innovative practice is also a change in practice. They don't need to feel anymore that they're the sage on the stage, and we're moving away from that so that we're co-learners in a lot of the innovation that happens in the classrooms, and we become the guides on the side, so that it's about creating students who can learn, relearn, that they can be problem solvers, that they can be lifelong learners, that we're helping them through that journey. The inquiry helps to facilitate that, and recognizing that there are students in our classrooms who are experts, and that's very much a shift in focus over time, that teachers over time felt that they have to be the expert. They shouldn't be asking questions along with their students. They should be answering all of them, and that's a shift that I think some teachers find hard to accept.
Any stories, Rudy? Stories from you?
Well, just adding to what Chris was saying in terms of what you were asking about a breakthrough, to me it was about maybe 4 years ago when, as part of the Learning Conditions Initiative and having access to a team of teachers collaborating across the province, and one of the things I realized is that what's happening is that a lot of this is becoming web-based, and to me that was a big breakthrough, because I remember then talking to teachers on my side, and the discussion used to be, so are we getting a new lab? What's in the computers? Is it, and I remember it was always like, what's the word processor that we're going to be using, right? And then I remember like just saying, like the shift in thinking is it's not about that anymore, and completely adding to what you're saying, it's the kids coming in and saying, hey, my grade 6 teacher was so cool, I learned about Prezi, can I show you? And then it doesn't matter what computer you're on, because that's web-based. Again, that idea, that shift in thinking, I think is really important, especially if you're going to try to be a model in your school. Then you have to have that knowledge, I think, that a lot of what's out there, and half of it, most of it you still don't know about, but you know how to look for it.
So Brian, this is your beginning your second year at a new school, and I know you and I have shared a few little stories about things you observed, maybe in just a year, in terms of, you had some ideas about changing a culture or building upon a culture. Any kind of examples that you could share from last year?
Yeah, I think when I think about the change in the school that I'm at in the last 12 months, it's been really remarkable, and not just from my own perspective as a principal, but really looking at just the simple decision I made to direct the staff that if you wanted your students to use their own devices, and our school has full Wi-Fi access, and our board has a policy that enables students to bring their own devices and connect to our network. So that, I give that credit, and not just because Todd's in the room, but although that is part of the reason, but that infrastructure really needs to be there in order to support that stage where you say to students, use your own devices. And there were several staff who were ready to go with that. Many staff that were reluctant, and also some staff that were not interested at all in engaging in that. And in order to sort of nudge that along, what I made the decision was to provide an iPad to any staff member who was interested in using it as an assessment and instruction tool and engaging in some co-learning with their colleagues around the different ways it could be used. And then the third was to just tinker. And that's why I had so much fun. Our tech lead, our superintendent, and myself came to ECHO last year to hear John Seeley Brown, and his keynote was all about we don't tinker enough. We don't take things apart and play with them and just for the sake of learning. So when we came back to the building, we said to the staff, here's the tool, tinker. Find out what apps you like, find out what apps you don't like, and whenever we have the chance to get together as a staff, which this past year wasn't a lot, to be honest, we spent our time just in small groups showing one another what we had learned in our classrooms. So I think for me that leveling up is not about pressure as much. It's about creating connections, creating opportunities for people to say what they've learned and connect what they've learned to what someone else has learned. And for me, pushing the technology into that so they could see how web-based and cloud-based tools could make their job as classroom teachers more efficient, more effective, and a little less onerous than what perhaps they were used to experiencing. The big thing that I think our staff came away from, because on the last day, we just had, the end of the year smackdown. What did you learn? Share it with the rest of the group, was that there was a playfulness about it, but also they realized that they looked a lot like what our junior and intermediate classes looked like when the students had their devices out. And one of the intermediate teachers made that comment. He said, geez, we look just like my classroom at lunchtime. Everybody's got their devices out all over the place and they're just playing around with them and sharing stuff. So I think I'm confident moving into a new school year with the understanding that when you trust people to learn and you trust them to use tools that allow them to connect to the whole big world outside of our schools and classrooms, they'll actually do that. I mean, you still have to monitor it. You still have to provide feedback. You still have to, regulate because you're responsible for the safety and the respectful learning environment. But when you actually trust people to learn, they actually do. And to me, that's really what leveling up means. It's more about trusting and connecting people.
So with that, let me just take a tweet here from somebody and I like this because this is from somebody who is in an administrative position and recognizes that perhaps the words innovation and educational bureaucracy might be an oxymoron. Or, as Todd has wondered, maybe it's an opportunity. So I don't know if Rudy, from a classroom perspective, you felt that's my question, I guess, to you specifically is, do you feel that innovation is something that is being, that's easy for you to do or think about in terms of the support you've had from at the school level, at the district level, provincial level? Or do you feel that at times it's caused a bit of a challenge for a barrier to do the things that you think you'd like to do in the classroom? And I'll let the others answer that too, but I just want to start with Rudy on that one.
It's a little bit of both. More positive, I think, overall. Right now, I'm really lucky to be at a school where there's a lot of teachers that are willing to tinker and play and do all of that. I think, I forget which of the three of you mentioned the biggest thing that happened really was when they upgraded the Wi-Fi system, because there was real obstacles up to then, like limits of how many people to log in and where you had to be sitting at the time. And if I'm on, the worst thing that could happen is me having the teacher computer, me the one that's the slowest, and the kids are moving a lot faster than me. And all of a sudden, once that happened and you start seeing all of those things come up, I think that was huge. All of a sudden, you would see more people trying. You would see more kids doing it. When you're walking down the hallway, and you see kids sitting on the floor with their iPads and in little circles doing things, and it really, by the time you made it to the other end of the hallway, at least half of the students and teachers are involved in some kind of collaboration with technology. That's the big thing. I think that's what I see more and more. In terms of administration, I just like sharing that one of the things I notice is because it changes all the time, you can possibly really stay current with the specifics of what technology you're using. So one of the things that is worthwhile doing is to let your admin know, or even people at the board level that happen to be visiting, to just come in and just see what's going on and just sit down and pay attention. There was a time where Anita came to our school for a visit. So I was released from my classroom, and I remember just sitting beside a student and just talking to them, and they were working on their iPad, and I'm thinking, wow, that's just the thing that needs to happen more. And I think when you make that happen, when you feel like most classrooms, I like to say all classrooms in my school, that can happen. I can use my prep time and just walk in there and see what's going on. And that happens at every level. I think that's part of it.
I want to follow up on what you said that when I was there, because what I thought was really neat, what you did when I was there, is you sat down next to a young girl at her computer and asked the student, we want to try and use technology to do math journals. What would you suggest we use? And then for 10 minutes, Rudy sat there with this student, and she showed him what she would recommend they use to do their math journals. I have a video of it too.
I remember.
See, it's those conversations, and Brian started it with looking at the staff and conversing and sharing. It's the sharing that I think helps us to move forward. The student there gives you an idea that you didn't have before. You can take that idea to a next step. Or if you just listen to some of their conversations as they work together, and you look at them and they're 12 or 13-year-olds, and you think, wow, those are some deep conversations. They've grasped the matter. They can make suggestions on how to improve. They can give feedback. They can become critical friends and give feedback to one another. And for myself as a professional, I love coming to these conferences, meeting with other people of like mind because of the conversations. There's so much with Web 2.0 tools, you can't know it all. It's hard to even scratch the surface. Yet we sit together and somebody says, well, oh, that's a problem you have. Do you ever try Evernote for that? Why pull that up in Evernote. You might be able to look at it. Or, geez, have you ever thought of going to this website? Let me show you how to do that. And in a classroom, those are exciting times when I'm working with a student and I say, I haven't got a clue. Hang on, let's call Arth. He's an expert in that. He can help us. Okay, Arth, you do the teaching right now. And he comes forward and he shows a group of students what he knows, and he helps them along, and we can all learn from one another. That really excites me.
So far though, looks like we don't have any educational barriers, so everything's just all good to go at this point. But maybe not. And by the way, one of the things we discovered as we were sort of gathering together, that the four panelists are all sort of have an elementary base. So if you're a secondary teacher and you offer a different perspective to things, be prepared to share your perspective in some way or another. But anyways, Brenda, I interrupted.
I was just going to follow up with that, saying that, like Ken Robinson says, we have to find our tribe. And so what I love now is that, I've been that person at a school where no one else is interested in trying some new things. So you're kind of stuck either taking courses or whatever. Now I have my professional learning network. So those conversations don't even have to happen face to face. If Brian has a teacher who's interested in something and he's got a connection in his network, there you go. You've got your support is maybe not in your building, but it's somewhere else. That to me, I'm totally in awe of that. Every time I collaborate with teachers from somewhere else, it's just amazing.
And
Could have saved money in my graduate degree.
And yet, as I was, as it's continued with what Brian was saying, I'm suggesting that you are in a minority. The fact that you have that understanding of how to collaborate, how to connect with others, and this is where, again, I think if we hold a random sampling of teachers and ask them about how they've been able to be innovative in the classroom, and going back to because I still want to get at this idea of whether or not educational bureaucracy is a barrier to us, and if it is, what does that look like and feel like? And this is maybe where I will open it up to the audience if there is anybody because I really want to sort of take this aspect of the conversation a little bit further. If you've seen something that's preventing you from doing the things that you want to do, and I don't like to get into a big, a negative, totally a negative connotation around this, but I also think it's important that we address that and be honest with the fact that sometimes it doesn't just work as smoothly as we'd like it to. But I don't know, maybe there's piggyback on that, Brian.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's designed to work smoothly, but we like things to work smoothly. And I think because nobody wants to look like a fool in front of a room full of children. Nobody wants to look like they don't know what they're doing in front of parents because we feel the stakes are really high. And you contextualize that in a climate where we look for more and more standardized measures of what it means to be learned or learned, that we all feel in the system that pressure. But I think it's more of a fear that holds us back and less of a constraint. As a school principal, and even as a classroom teacher, the number of times that somebody stands over or stood over my shoulder to actually watch what I do were very limited. And, as a principal, as long as I'm not triggering a bunch of calls to my superintendent, which presumably means I'm running my building well, I'm not generating any additional work for anyone in the organization other than the people that I'm responsible for supervising, I have very limited overseeing and a great deal of autonomy. And that's what I think is the lie, perhaps, and I'm being a little more provocative probably than I normally would. The lie that we've told ourselves is that we don't have autonomy. When the reality is we have a lot more autonomy than we think we do. If we also have norms within our schools that pull us to very conservative practices by just looking around what everyone else is doing. And when we're not doing what everyone else is doing, we start to worry. We start to get a little anxious, and then we hold back. But there is a tremendous amount of autonomy available for a classroom teacher, provided you're able to communicate and articulate why it is you're doing and what impact and result it's having on the well-being and on the achievement of your students. And at the school level, part of my role as a principal, I see, is to communicate to parents, we're doing this differently because of this. And sometimes the conversations that the parents and I have are really heated conversations. And sometimes, I have to walk away and think, okay, I'm going to have to change my strategy here. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't be having those conversations. It doesn't mean that the teachers in classrooms shouldn't be prepared to look at what they're doing and say, this doesn't really work for all of my students. I'm going to have to come up with a different plan. But I don't know in our culture of instruction if we have reached that point where it's okay for every teacher to do that. And, there's a lot of teachers in the room, and I actually see some people nodding, so I'm not going to call you out. But really, that's the big question for me is, if you keep doing something, even though you know it's not working, why are you doing it? And, I became a principal so I could ask that question. Why are you doing that if it's not working? And I don't know if we're at a point where teachers feel comfortable asking each other that. But I'm encouraged because when I look at teacher discussions and chats on Twitter, I hear those and see those questions all the time. And nobody seems to get all, pissy about it when somebody from, Texas says, why are you doing that? Is it working? So I hope that we'll be able to create that type of culture within schools and not just between people who are, all in different schools or different parts of the world. Because that's what we see, right, when we look at professional learning online between teachers. Unfortunately, they're not always working in the same building. It would be so much better if they were.
And that culture of, you have to have a very special relationship with another teacher you're working with to be able to ask that. Why are you doing that? Can you justify? Or it doesn't seem to be working. Is it working? There's, I don't know, if federation gets involved, if you think that, you're being challenged by a colleague, those are sometimes, I don't know, courageous conversations or dangerous conversations to turn and say, geez, Brenda, I don't know, is that working for you? Because why are you doing that anyway? And that's a tough one to be able to do.
And yet, I know with your work, Brenda, that's a big part of it, is getting people to the point where they can have those really important conversations,
Right.
sometimes difficult.
Not the nicey
Right.
stuff, right?
That's what I was trying to get you to do with each
that
other,
takes-
not be nicey.
Yeah.
But a little too nicey.
Well, another lie I think we tell ourselves is that we need tons of technology in order to be innovative. And I don't think we need tons. I think back to when I started blogging with kids, which was in 2006, primary, but still, my projector and a couple of desktops, we were connecting with classrooms around the world in global projects, talking to trustees who really didn't know what I was talking about. So maybe it was a good place to be because they weren't asking questions. They didn't know what wikis and blogs were. But I don't see, it doesn't have to be one device in everybody's hands, although we'd love that. We can do much more than that. But that excuse, I don't like that excuse anymore. That I don't have enough.
Well, and that brings me to another sort of a challenge in the world that we live in, because on the one hand, I feel like there's a push in many respects for things like systematic change and standardization and common assessments, and there's that whole shift towards sort of getting everybody on the same page, contrasted with the whole notion of differentiation, contrasted with people finding their own way and autonomy. I'm wondering how those two concepts, and I'm not suggesting they're always in conflict, but many, many times they are, and our perceptions, like when you mentioned the fact that, well, that person has these devices, that school has that set up, we need that too. How do you, as either as a classroom teacher or in your leadership roles, take those two sometimes supposedly different competing ideas around standardization and making sameness happen? Because sometimes sameness and system things are important, and yet at the same time honoring individuals and differentiation. That's one I just can't wrap my head around for a lot of times.
I think I could respond to that because, I don't know if there's a really good answer for that, but some successful things that I see are when the system helps, so in your senior admin, and you try to get those infrastructure things ready to go so that teachers can actually use technology. So you have that standardization and maybe a certain level, but then you mine some stories, you go after what's really working well and you try and celebrate that and share that out. I think about, we have assistive technology in our province that was mandated from the ministry a number of years ago. So I think about when that first started, that was a big part of my coaching role at the beginning, and how here we had all these students with special equipment and what we were going to do with it. Everybody sort of had that standard, and yet it was when you could celebrate some of the best stories that came out of that and share that out, that's where capacity started to build, and that collaboration piece, that depth, I think, came, that's what I was saying.
I want Andrew to expand on a tweet he had here, because I'm fascinating when you're talking about autonomy. Sorry for maybe jumping here. You said the problem is that when you're talking about autonomy needs to be differentiated. Can you explain what you're suggesting around that? And folks can respond.
Well, I think even in respect to what we're talking about ed tech, and I think you touched on it too, Dean, that people are at all different sorts of levels. And in this room, we have a lot of people who are open to all sorts of innovation. That's not necessarily the mainstream. I think it's the same with autonomy. I think that we have teachers in a school who have all different levels of autonomy. And we need to differentiate for that. Some teachers need a lot of support around certain things. Some people are new coming in. Some people are making a change. And some people need a lot more autonomy so they can express what they're doing more fully.
Sounds like every classroom and every, you know,
Yeah.
demographics of every classroom.
And people need autonomy around different areas too. You know, I mean, somebody may know very, very well their curriculum, but they're being asked to take on something in terms of introducing new technology. So they'll need more support and less autonomy on that aspect.
I'm wondering, my background is York Region, and we have a policy that allows students to bring in their own devices. How many other boards are like that? Do other boards allow their students to bring in their technologies, or?
Ours does, but it's
Yes.
not common.
Because there in itself increases, you know, for a student to say, well, I only have one computer, so there's nothing I can do about it. Well, actually, if you let your kids bring in their devices, you've got a room full of technology, you know, that kids can use.
We're moving towards that. I can tell you that we're going into September with a BYOD, brand new policy at our school, and there's already a divide among staff, and that's a whole other like. I wanted to, one of the things you were asking, Dean, I think having been at this site for going into my fourth year, sometimes being in one place for a few years does help. Having been through I'm going to throw a whole bunch of acronyms at you now, the TILCPs, then to the CILMs, now we're moving towards the CIs, and having gone through all of that, and once again, there's always been sort of different, Andrew, you said his name was?
Yeah.
You were mentioning sort of the autonomy and the independence in that, and what level you're at going in. I find that to have been a really overall positive experience, because it's got teachers together talking to each other, and it had nothing to do with technology, but it was about challenging. And so that's how you teach that form of writing. Oh, okay. Like having these discussions, you never have these discussions. It wasn't even about resources. It was about pedagogy, and it was about how do you get from here to here. And having done that for a few years, I think makes it a little bit more natural to move on to the discussion as to, okay, so how about technology? How does that fit into inquiry? And that I just wanted to add that component as well. And a lot of it, interestingly enough, is come from the top, from the ministry all the way down with funding and all of that, and all of those monographs, free and release, and all those, which once again is not ideal in some ways, but I think a lot of positive came out of that in moving forward towards what comes next. The BYOD is going to be interesting. I really don't know what to expect in a couple of weeks. We don't know what we're getting into. I don't think our board is traditionally behind when it comes to these things. I don't know if you noticed that, Anita, in your visits, and we've heard all the other boards are doing it, so here we are, and I'm telling you, there was a lot of people that are saying, but why? We don't need it. We have the technology in the schools. We have enough, couple cards going around. Why do we need more? Because it might not be about quantity, right?
Right.
It often isn't.
It's the conversations, I think, with, when I started allowing my students to bring their own devices into class, I had to train them, okay, look, the door's closed, you pull them out, we use them in here, it's structured, it's purposeful. Do not pull that out in the hall because another teacher will take it away from you. Like, do not show it in the schoolyard. And going into my principal and having the conversation, look, you can't blanket condemn this because you're going to kill my classroom. Like, we operate a whole different way. And then another teacher comes in for whatever reason to speak to me, and they're looking around thinking, what are you doing? Like, these kids have cell phones out. They have all these devices. They're not supposed to be using this at school. But then that started the conversations. Well, this is why I'm doing it, and this is how I'm doing it. And then you find out another teacher says, you know what? I'm going to close my door too. And I'm going to let my students bring, and then it'll just, it was kind of like they couldn't beat us eventually, so they joined us. Now you see them in the halls doing in small groups, working and doing what they need to do.
But I guess part of my concern, and I guess, is the fact that yes, we do need teachers that, or we have to understand that teachers are at different levels. So some are going to say, why do we need all this? And I know I've made the mistake personally of just trying to convince everybody that the way I did it, or the way I saw the world was the right way. And so should you. Instead of understanding that with limited opportunity to have those conversations, sometimes that meant that we had to let people do what they were comfortable with. So if teacher A was not comfortable with having kids have their devices open, then we shouldn't feel compelled to try to convince them to, or make a rule to say you have to. And vice versa, the teacher that said, I'm ready to do this, we shouldn't have been making rules to say you can't because the person, I had these conversations with people that said, we can't do this because this other person isn't comfortable with that. And to me, that never made any sense to me. But again, that flew in the face of our traditional understanding of a systematic change, is that we all have to be doing the same thing. Either we're chewing gum or we're not chewing gum. We're wearing hats or we're not wearing hats. We're bringing devices or we're not bringing devices. And I think that's been a consistent conflict. We've got about 10 more minutes, and I would love some questions from the audience. Robert's going to kick us off, but if other folks want to jump in, and please, if you want to address something specifically that the panelists have mentioned, ask them for further follow-up, or if you have your own perspectives on this conversation, this is a great time to hear from them. So, Robert.
Thanks, Dean. Fantastic discussion. Robert Verlanchi, Shared Learning, publisher of the Shared Learning Report. The words that come to my mind is skills gap. There's a skills gap that we hear about from Conference Board of Canada in meeting the needs of future leaders and jobs that are, there's millions of jobs that are projected to be vacant because we are not graduating students with the proper skills. That's obviously at the post-secondary level. So students are lacking skills, teachers are lacking this proper skills because of the lack of professional learning. There's a lot of moving parts we talked about. And, I look at the faculties of education, and I've got the luxury, like you do, of traveling across the country, North America wide, and it's all over the map. So what are you seeing in the way of this the student teachers coming into the schools who are, our future teachers? Michael Fullen talks about 25% of teachers, he estimated on TVO interview, that are actually using ICT effectively, in a pedagogically sound way. So, let's focus for a moment on, what are the faculties of education doing? How are they transforming from an innovation standpoint? I know York's trying hard at it. I'm not sure what U of T's doing. I know Brock's doing some good things, but we all have to be on the same page, if I can simplify it. And it's a very challenging process because of all the moving parts. So are we encouraged by our future leaders, future teachers that you're seeing coming into your schools, that you're collaborating with? Are they all over the map like a lot of teachers being at different places, or what's the future hold in store for us?
Well, the students that have applied to the Midtown option at OISE, U of T, those are my students, looking over their applications, and they get to put a first choice or a second choice for which program they want to be in. The Midtown option is the technology option. So reading over their rationales, I'd say only 3 or 4 of them put down that they felt that technology was the way of the future, that they were lacking, and therefore they needed more instruction, and that's why they chose this particular option. Most of them put down that they chose the Midtown option because they were already lovers of technology and they wanted to take it to the next step. One of my responsibilities at OISE is the technology infusion lead. And so it's my responsibility to work with all the other instructors, because it's the same whether you have teacher candidates in your room or you have students. It's the comfort level of the teacher. That's who's going to make the difference. So my responsibility is to work with the other instructors of the other options to support them and introduce them to new technologies and help them see a way that they can integrate it into their programs. Because again, if the student teachers aren't presented with it, then what will they have? What will they take away when they move forward? So hopefully they're encountering it in their classrooms.
And I'm affiliated with Wilfrid Laurier closely because they're partner with our board. So there is a program pre-service for students who are more interested in technology, and they get some equipment, and they are hopefully paired in a school that is technology enhanced or with a focus on technology. But again, it really sort of depends on what associate teacher you get. But I've seen some of those younger teachers take leadership roles in the school and help with staff and that kind of thing. So if the culture's there, ready to accept that in the school, then there's a lot of things that can happen. It's really great when I see experienced teachers with lots of pedagogy knowledge who may not have a lot of techie experience but are willing to learn, and then that person comes in, because sometimes if the teacher candidate comes in as a tech and they're perceived as being techie, they don't have those other pieces of the pie like the content and pedagogy knowledge that we know is important as well. And they are stressed out thinking that, they're counting on me to be the technology lead, and I don't know about learning with technology for learning, so.
And I would just say, echo that, that's a major point that Brenda raises, is the fact that, and I teach at the University of Regina, and I would suggest that our post-secondary institutions are even more diverse, I guess, in their approach to technology, simply because in so many cases, professors are pretty independent contractors. They work isolated, and there's less collaboration, I think, at the department level within a university than there is even at the school level. That said, even under the greatest situations, the huge determining factor about a young teacher in terms of what they will be like in the classroom is, in fact, that very first experience in an internship program, because even if they've learned all these wonderful things, and yet if they have a teacher who's resistant, or at a school where they don't have the affordances to be able to use the technology, many of the things they learn just won't get implemented. And I know that from teaching those teachers who have gone into those situations and said, boy, you taught us all this cool stuff, but the teacher I'm working with isn't interested in it or won't let that happen, or they just don't have the access, whatever it may be. And then again, that first year that they begin teaching, if they're in another one of those kinds of cultures that doesn't foster that, it's not long before they will sort of revert to, well, this is just the way that it is. Mm-hmm. So even as you suggest, Robert, that the skills maybe need to be taught, it's that connection with those very early experiences as a teacher, as an intern, that have probably more significance in terms of what will happen as opposed to their actual education. Can you step up to the mic? Well, we can't catch the stream if you don't. Sorry. Yeah, but the you do for the room, but the stream doesn't quite get it.
No, just to add to that too, I had the opportunity this summer to go down to Austin as an Apple Distinguished Educator, and there I was able to meet up with two profs from Nipissing who are piloting pre-service teacher one-to-one iPad programming, as well as other technology using smart boards and everything else. So in terms of what's coming down the pipe, it has to do with, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said about each individual, and sometimes we as teachers feel that you're in your own little bubble and you're not necessarily working as a team if you're in a school where you may only have one grade partner and that's it. But it is coming, and if you want to check out some of the stuff that they're doing, they have things published on iTunes U. They've got some courses as well, and some iBooks coming out, and then even some of the stuff has been documented on the actual Nipissing website. So some really great ideas.
I thought there was somebody else that was going to respond. Todd, can you? I know you don't want to go to the mic, but
it's another question.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can repeat the question.
Okay, I'll repeat the question.
And basically, it is, why aren't there more principal administrators here at events like this?
All right. Why? Hey. So if you missed that question, why aren't there more principals and administrators? So let's just do a quick poll of the audience. How many of you are principals or administrators? All right, that's not a high number. Brian, what's wrong with you people?
I don't know. Richard and I clearly have it all figured out. I can't speak to the rest of. I think the job of a school principal is really not that more complex than the job of a classroom teacher. And certainly the way I was trained, and I've been recently trained, I mean, I've been an administrator now, this is my 5th year, certainly, again, didn't limit me to engage in the type of leadership that I do in my school. I certainly never felt that, and still don't feel that there's lots of constraints placed upon me other than, I'm responsible for a budget that's our folks in accounting help me make sure I don't overspend. I'm responsible for the safety of the students and the staff that are at my school, and I'm accountable and responsible to the families of the students that attend the school. But beyond that, there's a great deal of opportunity for me to engage in learning, but generally that happens when I learn with the students in the school and the staff that I'm working with.
But that's the key, I think, Brian, is that you see yourself, and is it Richard, sorry? As instructional leaders, and I know that's been tried to put upon particularly school-based administrators that you are the instructional leaders. I'm not convinced, though, that not only do those folks see themselves that way, but they're actually their day-to-day job, either because of the way they proceeded or because of what's been put on them, that they've been able to release themselves from that and engage and sort of embed themselves in the fact that I am an instructional leader first, and then I'll look after the administrative stuff sort of second. I think that's been a challenging shift from my perspective when I look at school-based administrators and how they're trying to move in that direction. I mean, you made that shift, obviously, maybe you started that way all the time, but that's what you are, and so the other stuff comes secondary, but I'm not, that would be my argument, and I'm wondering, Todd, since you asked the question, if you have your own insights as to why there are not more administrative folks here today.
It was a rhetorical question. Superintendents.
Yes.
So
That would be
leadership and priority, and like a few people will come, and I've seen principals try to get out to these things, and all of Brian's points are well taken. But until this, what we're talking about, this innovation, this digital learning gets up there, ramps up in the priority level of their thinking, then budgets get applied. And so, what you guys are doing in classrooms and what some administrators are doing in leadership is critical to model. But I still think we're at that thin edge of the curve we talked about yesterday.
And I think that's why, back to what I was sort of trying to understand in my own mind, why we haven't seen the systematic. We see lots of pockets, and we want to encourage those pockets. We have great people here that are doing that, but I think that's probably the key, I would guess, as to why we haven't seen more of a systematic changes, because leadership as a whole hasn't quite got there in terms of wrap their head around of how to empower teachers and how to provide them the structure, the autonomy for them to do great things, and then be able to bring that together to sort of tell the story of this is what the change looks like. It's not exactly the same in all cases, but it's happening in many regards. We're going to wrap up here, and I just want to sort of give each of you sort of a last word to sort of either an encouragement or just sort of a little bit of a way for folks to sort of take these ideas and run with them in their own way, just from your own perspective. So a little last word of encouragement before we wrap up the panel, and I'll let whoever's ready to go start, and let each of you have a shot at that.
I'm ready to start.
Okay, Brenda.
I would like to share that if you are a person who is using technology in your classroom, that just to urge you to share. Because I meet up with a lot of teachers who are doing great things, and they're lurking on Twitter, or they don't really want to have a blog going because they're not sure that they're ready to launch. As Seth Godin says, we have this trap of perfection. We worry that if it's not perfect, we're not going to share it. But my advice to you would be, if you would, share it, because we need your voices, and there's just some really great educators sharing online in Ontario, and the kinds of things I see are just amazing. So more of that would be just wonderful. I appreciate that.
Kind of, I had some notes, but I think I'm going to improvise with that one. I see that, what I see is that not every teacher has to be also sort of at the forefront of what's going on. There's got to be diversity in our schools, and there is, and there always will be in different strengths. My son is in graduate, he's going from grade 5 to grade 6. I was telling a colleague here a story yesterday. He's going to miss his teacher. He's the best teacher ever. And it was because he was the best storyteller teacher he's ever had. He could do a read aloud for hours, and you know, my son says, that's all I want. I just want him to read aloud to me day after day after day. Did he ever use technology? Never. It doesn't make him a bad teacher. It's just that was what he's given to my son's education. And it's, you know, there'll be a place for technology in his storytelling style, and that will happen and it will come. But there's got to still be a diversity and a room for personal and creativity and all that, I think. Just
I'll jump in because I think our schools are becoming less and less places where imagination is fostered, and we're struggling with how we create schools that will allow kids to make their dreams come true. Because I know as a parent, my kids go to school and have always gone to school with dreams, and sometimes when I look at what happens and what has happened to my children and what's happened to their dreams, it's hard for me to look upon that as a dad with the understanding that I'm actually part of that system. And so that's really that struggle that I have, and it's really a moral struggle. And I think that as teachers, as educators, if we connect with why we have dreams and what our dreams are, and are prepared to expose those with our students, with our colleagues, and then that would be a good start. I think also that if we, as educators, push against the forces of standardization, push against that, because that's what good teachers do. They push. And we talk about and model creativity. We talk about and model collaboration. And we talk about and model resilience for our students. Then that puts us in a different place, further away from the because I said so place that oftentimes we feel the system has put us in. And then the last thing for me is that it's stinking hard work. I mean, I love Richard Elmore's line where he says, teaching is not rocket science. It's a hell of a lot harder than rocket science. And it's hard work. And anytime we say to ourselves, I just want an easy, quick way to do it, or anytime we say to our students, oh, it's easy, you just do this, then we send a message to them, and a message that our job isn't demanding and hard, when it is incredibly demanding and incredibly hard, because everything that's rewarding is hard to do. And so I'm excited to go back to school. I've checked my bank account. I know why I need to go back to school. But mostly I'm excited to go back to school because I want to work hard again. I want to learn again, and I want to struggle. And I want to be part of a system where that's okay. And it's not all about one size fits all. It's a hard job we have, and that's why we have it, I guess.
Last word, Chris.
We were given the task of coming up with something, words that were encouraging, motivating, to the participants. And in thinking about it, realizing that probably if you're sitting there in this group, it's like preaching to the converted. These people are already motivated, but I'm thinking that being innovative or using technology, it's like that journey is like being on a train ride. You're on a train. Everybody gets on the train at a different spot. Don't worry about what spot you're at, but connecting to what Sherry said about sharing, share your journey as you go along, because the people getting on at other spots might really be able to benefit from your sharing. So, and eventually, depending on where they are, they'll either go back and help someone who got on at a different spot on the train, or be able to have a conversation with someone who might be considered more advanced, but they still have something to offer. So through the sharing, we'll all be able to make that journey on the train a little bit more enriched and benefit from the learning that all of us, the expertise that all of us have, and we can all learn from one another to help that train ride be a good one.
Thank you so much. There were so many great conversations that were started, and I've got some things that I need to kind of go away and think about, so we can continue these conversations online and other places. But anyways, let's give our participants a round of applause.